Thank you very much, Priscilla. Good morning or good afternoon to you, depending on where you happen to be today. My name is Julian Clover. I'm one of the editors at Broadband TV News, and our subject for the next little while is how to extract more value from video libraries. And to work through that with us, we have Dr. Christian Vogt, who is Head of National Data Task Force at SRG, one of the Swiss public broadcasters. Also, Brid Dooley, who is Head of Archive at the Irish public broadcaster RTE, and Will Penson, whose company Conviva does a lot of work in this area, and he's VP at GTM Strategy and Operations. So welcome to you all. I wonder if we could maybe get a couple of ideas from our broadcasters as to the kind of content that they have available in their archives. Brid, if I could start with you on this, please.
Sure, yeah. So our archives cover radio and television, and we have a large collection of photographic archives as well. We go back to, for radio, 1930s, although we started in 26. But our television collection, which is probably the one that features most in reuse, shall we say, in any case, goes back to 61. In fact, we're 60 years old on the 31st of December this year.
Happy birthday. Thank you. Are there any sort of legal requirements which the Irish authorities require you to host a particular type of content or maintain it or make it available in a particular way?
Yes, all of that actually, Julian, and more. So, in fact, we have legislation which covers what we do as the public broadcaster in terms of our managing our archives. So, we have a requirement to establish and maintain it, which of course means acquiring it daily, preserving it, documenting it, and making it accessible. And then we have specific pieces of legislation within that act around whom we make available to and what we must do. So we have two parts to it. One is the public access, where we make it available free of charge to the public. And we do that on our website every day and in other ways as well. And we also provide a commercial licensing service to all users, whether they are creative industries, professional users, inquiries, as I say, the full panoply of users. And that is legislated for under the Act. And in fact, we publish a scheme which relates to that on our website, on the rte.ie website, so that people know how we provide the services as well and what they can expect.
And that's available, is it anywhere around the world? It's not just geo-restricted to Ireland?
Well, our website is available around the world in the main, certainly the archives website, which is on rte.ie. Obviously, there's elements of what RTE publishes that it can't make available internationally.
Yes, of course.
But our ambition is always to serve the Irish public wherever they are. And for that reason, the archives in particular would be publishing in that way. In terms of licensing content, yes. Again, we're serving creative industries and they could be anywhere. So we apply the scheme to them regardless of where they are. And provide the service and as an efficient and and prioritize, I suppose, according to kind of the broadcast and the critical needs of both our own media companies who make programs using archive and also international companies.
Christian, I can imagine the Swiss authorities liking a little bit of legislation. What rules are in place in terms of what the SRG and others in your country have to offer in terms of archive?
Well, it's the law, it's a media law, and it's a very short sentence which says that all the business units of the SRG in all the language parts, we have 4 different languages in Switzerland, are obliged to open up everything they ever published and to the public. So, and that means we have everything, we don't have everything online, but since a few years, we're really pushing it online. So we're going back online. You can get footage from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We have only for the Swiss German part, we have about 2 million audio and video files already online, and they're coming every month more and more. And so we do not delete anything from the online thing. So the Mediathek is our online archive. And we do not much into curating. We have Facebook and YouTube channels, quite successful of that, but these are only little clips just to do sort of marketing. But the main thing is on our Mediathek, and it's growing. It's growing every month.
So on the Mediatek, you're seeing whole programs, are you, from
Sure.
from back in the archives?
Yeah, you can see from the 1990s onwards till today, so about 30 years without any blank in between the daily bulletins, the news bulletins from the whole Switzerland thing. So it's a huge amount of videos, especially audios are coming now. So it's our cultural heritage, and the lawmakers in Switzerland were very keen to have this all online available for free for the public. And of course, we do sell content, but this only for co-production and other things for external use. But this is sold via an external company, and we get some kickback from that.
That's very impressive. I'm imagining this is almost like being able to look through a series of old newspapers at a library. The difference here, of course, is you've got the video archive. So if there's, I guess, any major event in Switzerland over the last 30 years or so, somebody can go and do a search, and they can find that, and they can see the main television news bulletin of that day.
Well, Julian, in theory, yes, but the problem are the metadata. The content is there. In fact, it is there, but the problem is the quality of the metadata. Every archive has this problem. Right. And so on the Mediatek, we are not that good as we want to be. So we invented a new data platform outside our Mediatek where we are able to mix the data from the videos and the data we have in our archives. And the data in our archives, the metadata, is much more rich. And so we can enhance the quality of the search engine. And that works pretty good. So, but it's all about the quality of metadata.
I suppose anything that you're doing now, so today's news bulletin can be archived straight away with all the metadata that you think you'll need going forward. The problem, of course, if I ask for something from 1993, I might not be quite so lucky.
Well, from 1993, we might have the manuscripts, which are already online, so you can search full text. But today we have subtitles, we have transcripts, full transcripts of our radio broadcast, of course. So it's a huge and a vast amount of metadata today. And backwards, we're trying to enhance the quality of metadata. So we run diverse artificial intelligence programs to get more metadata to enhance the quality. And this is ongoing and costs time and money.
And what about prior to 1990? Are you going through, I don't know, what someone videotaped some, I guess the early pieces on film. Are you able to work with that as well?
In fact, in Switzerland, we have already about more than 95% of our archive is digitized. So all the films, 60 millimeters, 32 millimeters, are all on files. So they are available. It's just with some of them are rights issues. So we have to clear the rights, especially for music, concerts, and so on. This is a bit an issue. But all our own productions are digitized and they are online.
A friend of mine, I noticed this on Facebook yesterday. A friend of mine is going to an event in Birmingham, and they're screening programs from the 1971 Christmas schedule. And they've obviously managed to clear the rights, and a mix of BBC and ITV. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness! And I guess you could arguably do the same.
Yeah, we do. We actually do. And we invented a tool. It's called the biography tool. And well, the brand name is Timelines. And there you can just put in your birth date, and it gives you a timeline with the videos from when you were born. I don't know, it goes back to the 40s. So you're not born in the 40s, but later. But then you have for every little stop in your life, as you were a teenie, as you were an adult person, your crazy years and so on, you get some hints, and you get videos there, and you can do a similarity search and so on and so forth. That's a great tool.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. When you first started going through the RTE archives, it might have been you, it might have been a colleague, of course, of yours previously. But where did you start? Did you start on the current stuff, or was there, do you also have this need, like Christian was telling us, to go back in the archive and show some of that really early material, or at least make it available?
Yes, we have a slightly different approach to what SRG do. So our approach really is a curation one. So we have a dedicated RTE Archives website, and we curate content. It's similar to like On This Day. It's called Archives Daily. So we take a date and we plan ahead, and we will publish material relating to that date going back a number of years. And we go right back to the beginning in terms of television and radio material as well. So we can select from anywhere, and we do that all of the time. So very much a curation-led approach, hugely popular with audiences, with the public, and we use our social media to publicize the content we publish every day, but primarily it drives traffic back into the RT.ie website. So in terms of going back, yes, we do. Unlike Christian, we haven't yet completed the digitization program for all of our archives. So we have to do a lot of on-demand digitization still. But thankfully...
so somebody puts in a request, they want to see, I don't know, some significant news event. And if you haven't got it there, somebody's going to manually take the trouble to set it off on the road to digitization.
Now, having said that, we have digitized almost all of our news content, and we've published a lot of that in a different way. But similarly, you can go onto the RT Archives website, and you can actually, we have a very good search facility and quite rich metadata that we publish on there. And we've published a lot of our news catalog material online with the video. And that's often used by professional researchers as well as the public, because like that, it gives you a timeline to look at. But equally, you can find by personality, by place, by date, by name. So it's quite rich. And we intend to complete that. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of resources, but we would like to have all of our news content, which is generally speaking our own copyright. We'd like to have that available for anybody to view and search online easily. That said, if you can't find something, you will have to revert to our catalog. And we have a lot of workarounds going on for the creative side. So, for example, you can view a lot of the material that's digitized, but we're in the process of putting together a whole new digital infrastructure and environment at RT, which will link everything from the storage to the MAMs to the catalog, and that hopefully will solve a lot of our current kind of difficulties in getting stuff out and up as well online, which is that's what we do. Yeah.
Well, let me bring you in here, because I know that Conviva are working quite a bit in this area, not just with public broadcasters, but also with commercial broadcasters too. How are you helping the industry in this way?
Yeah, well, Conviva's been around for about 15 years now. We were founded to support the transition of TV from sort of traditional broadcast channels over to the internet. So we provide a streaming intelligence platform that helps video publishers make more informed, data-driven decisions regarding pretty much all aspects of their business. So think marketers, advertisers, tech ops, engineering, all these teams who are working to build and engage and monetize those audiences where applicable. Obviously, for public service broadcasters, that's a little bit more nuanced. But those decisions can include, how do you maximize the reach of and the accessibility of that archive. It's all powered by a patented stream sensor technology. So we see every frame of every video on every screen in real time, right? It's very comprehensive. So we've been working with some really, really big brands around the world. Think folks like Disney, Warner, NBC, Sky, and close to home in Europe, and sort of on the broadcaster side, people like Channel 4 and RTL and Mediaset. And it gives us this enormous data footprint. So we're typically seeing about 500 million unique viewers, unique humans, on about 4 billion app installations. And that all adds up to about 200 billion video streams per year. So in short, we do know a thing or two about how people are watching TV, what they watch, why they watch it, when they watch it, how they consume it. And that data is able to to support strategies like that.
What's I'm intrigued now. Obviously you're covering broadcasters right the way around the world. Is it the same most popular content generally everywhere? Are there some regional quirks?
There's definitely no one-size-fits-all model. There's a lot of nuance depending on where you are in the world. But even within given territories, humans, we're all unique. We all have our different tastes and habits. And that's one of the challenges that any publisher has, is identifying what those cohorts are. What are sort of common viewing behaviors. And this is the reason why services like Netflix have been so successful, because they've been able to leverage data to understand and to define literally hundreds of different cohorts and viewing behaviors across their audience.
Mm. Rid, what's popular for people searching the RTE archive? You know, we're coming up to Christmas. I know you're late chat show host Gay Byrne for many years did this Christmas toy fair in the run up to Christmas on his weekly show. Do people go looking for that, or what else are they searching?
Yeah, the toy show is probably, I think last year was extraordinary on the toy show at RTE, because the Late Show that you're referring to, I think it's probably one of, if not the longest running continuous chat show of its kind in the world. I make that claim anyway. I'm not sure I can fully substantiate it, but it's certainly been around since the beginning of television. And the toy show, I can't remember what year it started, but it started quite early and it's continued every year. It's hugely popular, not just in Ireland, but all around the world. It's extraordinary. And last year, and we always do provide, back check content, and it's searched around that time. We highlight it obviously, and it has huge cachet, shall we say, amongst the Irish public in general. But equally, I would say the most ordinary and surprising of material can achieve huge kind of hits. We run a lot of clips, I suppose it's a bit like that, the blooper type clip. We don't seriously go looking for them, but they're there, but people turn up looking at them. We have one clip from wintertime, which is literally somebody on icy roads. Icy roads are not that common in Ireland, probably get more common as our climate changes, but when we get them, of course, we're always surprised. We don't get the snow they get in the Alps very often. And when we do, of course, we're all very excited and we don't know how to deal with it. And so we tend to fall over a lot and we tend to have lots of silly accidents. So that's kind of what we've captured. And sometimes those kind of banal, mundane things. The other areas that people like to look at really is that kind of identity. When we talk about cultural heritage, we often think of sort of big, the big ticket items, the big historic moments. But actually for people, it's usually their own identity, their own place, their own sense of place, their own sense of who they are in the world. And they tend to go looking for very local footage. And that often trends, for no apparent reason out of the blue in terms of our public side, but equally in terms of our creative media side. We have a long-running series called Reeling in the Years, which I think might have had its origins as a title back in the day in the Beeb. But for us, it's a news-based program looking at what happened in every decade. And we have a fabulous producer who puts this together and has been doing so for a number of years. And he keeps going back in time. And young, old, all generations, this is one of the biggest talking points when he makes a new series.
Christian, what about you? Is it Swiss cultural heritage, of which there's plenty, I guess, to be talked about? Is that what people go looking for?
I think you have to differentiate between the different audiences we have. In TV, we tend to show really the old fiction films from the 40s and 50s. We do every year, we invest about 1 million Swiss francs per year in renovating one of these old films. And we show them, especially also maybe Christmas, Easter time and so on. And we see also on the platform that it really depends on who is searching. And that means that for the social media, we tend to push other archive content than we do publish on other, especially on TV and on the online platforms. But coming back to Will, you mentioned the cohorts. And we started last year a big video platform in Switzerland. It's called Play Swiss. And it's aiming at Swiss content with subtitles in all the languages and so on and so forth. And there's the big issue to have the right mix, and this also answers the question about the metadata. If you don't have enough metadata about our users, about our audience, and about our content we can offer, then we are sort of trapped. And this is a thing we are really working on right now.
And I guess, and interestingly, we've got a question which has come in, which kind of relates to what you were saying about the metadata there. I'll read the question. It says the TV industry is growing more and more into the strategy of deep linking their content towards cable and IP operators. Are the content providers then aware of the importance of good metadata for their content to be shared with the operators for them to be able to give the best possible content discoverability for the user? And I guess I might add, it possibly kind of works both ways as well.
Yeah,
sure.
Sorry.
Britt, please.
Britt, you go first. I'll come back to Christian and Mo.
Yeah, no, I was going to jump in there because it just said EGRT in the question. And I think the answer to that is absolutely. It's one of the biggest, it's one of the big, I suppose the metadata has become essentially king in that sense, the quality of your metadata and the consistency of it and the alignment of it across different parts of the business inside the broadcaster to make that connection and deep link it across new platforms, the way in which discoverability is going in terms of how audiences view. If you don't have that in order, you're going to start losing out. And I think, you know, everybody knows that, but it's not easy. If there was a simple magic bullet on it, everybody would have done it by now. But I think we have a role to play, if I can speak from the archives point of view, and that we usually have a good foundation there at least, and a consistent foundation. Not always perfect by any measure of means, but working closely then and in collaboration with our online platforms, with our technology people. RT is quite a small organization in some ways, and that kind of interconnectedness across the business is really important to kind of focus on that area of development and, you know, do the work in a way, again, probably a different take on it, but very much, I mean, SRG quite far ahead from what I could hear in many ways on this. We're working towards how we can develop, for example, more single sign-on and things like that. And then how do we align the metadata so it's really going to be discoverable for audiences, whether it's new content or whether it's content made with archival footage or whether it's the archive itself, which does inform a lot of the time, particularly our news side, because we're often there, you know, with the news, with the sports teams, trying to make sure that they've got the content relevant.
I guess your equivalent to Play Swiss, which Christian mentioned, was the RTE player. Is that where we find, I guess, for the consumer facing, that's where we might find the archive content? And is it then the website if somebody is, I don't know, making a documentary and wants to include some footage of people falling over in the snow in Ireland?
It's a bit more nuanced than that. The player tends to be the output on, you know, and the created media of today's schedules, both online and on our existing linear platforms, which of course are still there. But as a public broadcaster, RT is also carried by a lot of the commercial companies. So whether it's the Sky EPG or the you know, the Virgin company, whatever streaming services are available to audiences, we need to be there, and they are commercial services. So even though we have a digital television system for similar to Freeview in the UK called Serview, that doesn't really, you know, that covers the whole country, but there's much more than that on the commercial channels, and audiences want more than that. So we have to be there as well. So I think our audiences, yes, they're going to the player channel, and we have to develop that's our flagship really. The archives site is, of course, a more it's much lower down in sort of the pecking order in terms of, we'd say, the volume of hits it would get, but it's not insignificant. And one can help the other, particularly, as I say, around news and sports daily. But for other material, drama would be big. You know, we've a lot of really good dramas going on.
And are you able to sufficiently monetize it, the archive content for professional users?
Yes, we are. And interestingly, I mean, COVID, which we haven't mentioned yet, which is amazing. COVID was a really interesting
22 minutes in, that's not bad going, is it? Really?
Well, COVID was a really interesting time for archives because we had to get off site in the main and minimize our presence there to be safe. But we still had to provide a service, and a lot of our material wasn't digital, but we still managed to find ways of working. And we saw this huge increase in demand, and it was already increasing. And the more you publish, the more you make available, the more demand grows, and the more therefore you have to service. So yes, we are exploiting the content commercially. We've seen you know, obviously for our own creative media sector, that'd be our primary sector, whether it's on RT's own platforms or in other platforms, including these islands of the UK and Ireland generally, because there's a lot of shared kind of interest across that side as well, but into Europe and further afield as well. In terms of the access we can provide, generally speaking, you know, it's really just you know, mostly is just having you know, the demand is there, and we will meet it, and we will prioritize, obviously, as I say, our broadcast critical and production material, but others as well. A lot of material going into the cinematic feature sector as well. You know, we saw a huge interest in music documentaries a number of years ago, quite niche, some of them, but others quite big, and we would have a lot of archive relating to international entertainment and culture as well, which people mightn't realize, and we tend to be able to license that regularly and often, so people will come back to us and they'll say, oh, I didn't know you had that. They'll come for more. So yeah, so the website's a good, shall we say, window on it. It's not got everything, but it gives you a flavor, and then essentially you come to us and we'll do that more extensive research for you and get the material to you and get the rights cleared and whatever needs to be done.
Okay. Well, I wonder if I could bring you in again now, because, and Britta alluded to this a little earlier on, there's lots of places where the content can end up. How do you make sure that the right content gets to the right place? Now, sometimes, I don't know, there's differences, say, to what a cable operator might be able to offer on their catch up to what a telco is offering, and other similar examples as well. Is that easy to filter it out? Is it just a matter of the right metadata, or is there a bit more to it than that?
Yeah, I think with respect to, how do you promote the right content to the right person at the right time, I'd split it into three parts. And the first being metrics. So we talked a lot about metadata, and metadata is absolutely fundamental. So little of what Conviva does works without an effective and consistent metadata strategy. But metrics go kind of hand in hand with that. So, one of the missions is to identify, what does success look like in terms of metrics? And that will vary depending on the kind of publisher you are and the kind of content that you're delivering, right? It's as basic as more plays and more minutes for an advertising funded broadcaster is success. For a subscription one, it's number of viewers and how often they come back. For an archive service, maybe it's something like percentage completion rates of content. But whatever you identify as the right metric, you then have to sort of democratize that across the business. You have to have that consistent source of data across the organization, single source of truth, because if everybody is, using different data sources to try and answer the same question, then, you're already sort of trying to push the boulder uphill. And then I think sort of the third part is, well, then how do you turn that data into action? And with respect to, content discovery, this sort of usually associated with recommendation systems. So when you look at, for example, Conviva publishes a state of streaming report every quarter, and we looked at the viewers who were the most engaged, the ones that are watching the most content, and hence, that's what we all want, obviously. And 90% of them agreed with the statement that, I frequently watch what is recommended to me when I start up the streaming service. So you look at the most successful services like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or anyone like that, you think about how long it takes you from opening up that app to finding something to watch. And it's usually in the order of seconds. It's probably not more than a couple of minutes. And so having data drive those recommendations based on, the underlying content metadata, what you know about your audience, those cohorts and the pathing is absolutely critical. And it's really the most effective way in the modern age to get the right content in front of you.
And it's interesting because some providers, of course, yes, they'll base it on what you've watched previously, but they've also spent many, many millions of dollars on some shows, and boy, do they want to make you watch those shows as well. Is your report picking up anything which says that viewers can kind of tell the difference at all between that, or do they just go for whatever's recommended because they think it's been picked for them?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, the content that they are producing in the first place is down to the data suggesting what will be popular. So it's usually pretty unlikely that content is being rammed at you. So
previous shows, historical drama does well. I guess it's the same as TV ever was. Historical drama goes well. Let's go and make some more historical dramas.
Exactly. The difference now is that it's census based and it's practically real time as opposed to the old sort of panel based measurement systems of the past.
Yeah, no, that's very true. We have another question I need to ask here. Might have touched on this. Can people from outside Ireland or Switzerland access the archive? If not, how can the link or access be obtained? I'll start with Christian, and then I'll flip it across to Brid afterwards.
Well, the question is yes and no. It depends on the rights. So, of course, the websites are worldwide accessible, but some of the content we have to block because we don't have the rights. So mainly on our Facebook and YouTube channels, content is available all over the world. And with Play Swiss, the newly platform for Swiss content, well, if you have a Swiss mobile number, you can access it from outside. You can register yourself, and you have the right to consume the content outside Switzerland. But the geo-blocking is, of course, an issue. And the rights are one of the metadata we have to really to follow up always. And for the archive content, I would say it's just a rough estimation, 50% or more you should be able to view from outside, but it's a try and error. And we have to be really careful not to harm the rights owners. And we don't want to go to court with that, you know. So
yes, I think, have you not had some issues in the past with that?
We did not, but we were lucky. But there were bigger issues in Germany with their archive content. They have a big issue. They are not allowed to open up archives after the mid-60s. So they have a big hole in opening up. They have now before the mid-60s, but then I think 2010 or later. So they have a big hole in their archive, in their openly accessible archives. Yeah, Switzerland is a sort of an island in Europe. Yeah,
I'm wondering.
A nice one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering as to why. I can understand, for example, if you're clearly not going to be distributing a Hollywood movie because that's straightforward. But are there minor issues then within Swiss content, which means you don't have the rights to send it further?
It's really about the rights, about the contracts you have done in the past. So, and normally you had the right to, for example, for documentations for the bigger productions, you had the right to publish it, let's say 5-10 times within 3 years on TV and maybe a little bit on online. But the online rights are quite new. So we know online rights only since about 20 years or so, and they are costly. And we compete with production companies with that. So they want also to make their share. So that's always the discussion. Do we have it on our platform? Do we do a total buyout and get all the rights? But
that can be expensive, I would imagine.
That's the problem. So we don't have that budgets for this. So it's always taken to, a give and take. So sometimes we change, and sometimes the trick is also you republish it on TV, then you are allowed again to show it for 30 days or 3 months online again. So these are also some tricks to get it again online for a sort of a long tail usage. But the rights are really a big issue, and it's a big difference between rights for news footage and the rights for documentation and fiction. So these are completely different fields. And
you're going to actors issues as well, aren't you? And whatever in the UK it'd be equity, but whatever the Swiss Actors Union is as well, there'll be contract agreements made with them over the years.
But also the cameraman had rights in the past. So the camera just behind the camera for news footage, he had all the rights. And of course, the author of the text, the reporter, and so on. Yeah, that's a tricky thing. And for some rights, you just have to wait for 70 years after they are dead, the cameraman and all of them. So just wait some decades more and we can open up much more content.
Yeah. But Britta, do you have similar issues, I guess, of not necessarily having all the rights to what you regard as your own stuff?
Yeah. So, legislation in terms of copyright, which is the foundation of what we're talking about in terms of rights, goes back obviously in time, and we've had a few changes in the laws. We follow the EU copyright directives now, and they tend to be implemented as they come along, and there have been some small changes over the last while, but fundamentally when television started, the commissioning process was in the Broadcast Act and the Copyright Act sort of aligned to that point. So around 1963, they changed the law, and RT, what it commissioned, it owned the rights to. However, what we would call those underlying rights that Christian referred to there, like drama, the texts themselves, if it's, if you're going to be making some films of Joyce's books, The Dead or whatever, those texts remain as a separate copyright. They have separate rights pertaining to them. Then you'll have the author of the actual television script. So there's all these nuances. The challenge is not the rights themselves. I mean, if you're willing to pay and negotiate, you'll get the rights.
You pay enough money, you can get most things.
Yeah, but the problem is the administrative cost of that is phenomenal. And there are two reasons for that. One, because it's historic legacies. You've got to kind of understand the whole panoply of the rights that you're trying to clear for maybe just one drama. The second would be the actual lack of, I suppose, again, we talked about metadata area, rights metadata in television particularly tended to be written on contracts that were paper-based. And that's where it was actually very specific. You're going to have other nuances as well, agreements by memo over time, agreements by email, you know, yes. And you're going to have to find all that data. And I was chatting about this to a number of colleagues. You know, what you're looking for is that holy grail, which would bring that metadata together to make it easier for you to actually mine it and find out what's the big issue here, and if it's worth it then, both financially in terms of the administrative cost and time you're going to put in and the outcome. So while there might be a demand for something, it might not be commercially viable. And I don't just mean that in terms of the return on the investment, but the broadcaster has to prioritize, particularly in public service, where it's going to put its money. And if you're going to, so we cleared material around 1916 for transmission, and it wasn't easy. And it wasn't that we didn't get it done, but boy, did it take time. And the outcome of that wasn't necessarily.
So does this mean you have to, a pure commercial decision for a public broadcaster? Sometimes you have to say no to somebody. Yeah. Sorry, you can't have that because it's going to take us however long it is, and we don't have the resources.
We don't have the resources. So it's a kind of an economic kind of, and it's a prioritization then. Is this worth doing? Not just commercially, but is there a big public value in this? Is this meeting our remit or not at this point in time? So it's a kind of it's a nuanced thing for the public broadcaster. It was purely commercial and a commercial deal. You'd be asking the same question, but in a slightly different way. So there's a lot of demand for period drama, perhaps from certain broadcasters, not necessarily from others. They can be very culturally specific. So that's the challenge.
What about, I think, 8 minutes left now. So if there's any questions which anybody wants to put to the panel, I'm happy to do that on your behalf. We've got one now. Are the content providers in a delinking scenario willing to share analytics with cable and IPTV operators for a more seamless user experience across IPTV, an OTT solution, and a third-party app, perhaps in a continue watching scenario? I'm actually going to pop this one. My broadcasters might be able to add something. I'm going to pop this question initially to Will, because I suspect he's possibly got a good overview of how all of that works.
Yes, we are starting to see a very gradual opening up of the sort of data ecosystem, the sharing between publishers and kind of content aggregators. It typically started off more in relation to sharing data about content delivery. So did it buffer? Did it have start failures where there may be a dependency downstream from the publisher on making sure that content is watchable? With respect to what did they watch? How long did they watch it for? Where did they leave off? All the sort of audience measurement and the engagement data, that is still considered quite sensitive across the industry. And it's one of the less likely data points to be.
Do you think it's interesting? Because there was a lot of fuss made a couple of weeks ago because Netflix gave us the shocking news that Squid Game and Bridgerton were really popular shows. And it's like, well, we knew that. Behind closed doors are not necessarily Netflix, but other providers. They must be giving much more granular data than that.
You'd be surprised how valuable and how sensitive that data is. It's probably the least.
Even on a broadcaster's own shows.
Yeah, because if you look at the cable and the IPTV operators now, a lot of them are sort of positioning themselves as a content aggregator for publishers' content. But in many cases, it's the broadcaster's own app that's embedded on that platform, and it's a closed ecosystem. So the operator has surprisingly little visibility into the viewing trends on those apps.
That's amazing. Christian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that at all. But
I would like to.
Please.
I think it depends really on the competition situation. We'll mention that sort of briefly, between the content providers and the other platforms. So where is the interest? Who is going to pay in the end? And of course, it's a trade. If I get something in return, I'm quite interested to share such of a knowledge, such numbers and so on about audience and about content figures, but I have to get something in return, and that's an individual sort of deal in the end. So that's how it works, in my view. I don't know what is Will. What is your experience in that? But I think we did that with Spotify, for example. We get some data from YouTube, Facebook, and others, and the big telco platforms. Of course, we are in talks with them and also interested in their numbers.
Brid, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
It's not really my, I suppose, area of kind of expertise inside the organization, so I wouldn't deign to kind of comment too much on it, other than to say that I think all the issues that are mentioned are challenging in terms of who you're sharing your data with. Obviously, there has to be dialogue with where those platforms are meeting your content and figuring out, you know, what data you have, what data they hold, and how you can utilize that, and obviously within all the legal constraints that go with that as well. So I think it's a watch and see on that area. I think everybody would like more data and be able to apply it more rigorously. I sometimes find, just from an archival point of view, which is where my kind of look in would be, we get limited enough data from our own. You know, we get it and we can see how well we're doing, but those are trends we're looking at from the point of view of delivering on our commitments, perhaps, rather than our commercial side. And I'd have to defer to others to talk about where they are on that.
Fair enough. I wonder if we could maybe do a little bit of future gazing now, Christian, because I know, are you know, things like AI, can that potentially, do you think, be used both in managing the archive and maybe actually grabbing more of this valuable metadata?
Well, at first place, we really use AI to generate better metadata. We tested a lot of things in sort of natural language processing. Also, we run a face recognition algorithm and object detection and all these things. So that helps a lot. And we are preparing for a second step to work with AI methods also on big data when we are tracking our consumers. So that's, of course, of interest, but it's a huge thing. And first,
that's the sort of thing they've done. And I think Britt alluded to single sign-on earlier. If somebody is signing in to one of the SRG services from an app or via their TV, but you'll be able to,
but Julian,
to spot where they are.
That's the easy part. We don't have a login, sort of. We have only for PlaySwiss, we have a forced login, but for the other content, it's free. That's the public service part of it. We cannot force our audience to log in, so we have to deal with another type of data. We also have to ask for the consent via a cookie banner or something like that to track people. So we have a smaller databases than the commercial publishers have. That's a problem.
Interesting. Well, a couple of short answers actually from both Will and from Brid. Will, what's your big bet for the future? What should we be looking for?
Well, AI is huge, obviously, and Conviva employs AI in our technology quite extensively. I think the biggest trend that we're seeing at the moment is more innovative ways of monetizing audiences. So traditionally, it's all been about, you know, how can I get more plays and more minutes and more viewers? But now we're looking at, you know, how do you get more money out of the same audience and the same traffic? So, you know, one of the technologies we've developed recently is a unique stream ID that can be used by publishers to, you know, deduplicate their audience and identify incremental reach. So if you can demonstrate to an advertiser or an agency that I have a truly unique audience here, then you can demand higher ad CPMs for it. So I think monetization is going through a real step change at the moment.
Okay, and Brid, I'll end with you. What's the next big thing?
Well, the current and the next big thing for us is that business of the management of the archive, the content, the library, to actually make it work for everybody who needs to kind of exploit it in whatever way that is, whether it's purely for the public service remit or whether it's for the commercial value it contains. And within that, I think it's the AI is to try and get better. You know, some SRG, as Christian explained there, they were already probably quite ahead on this in some ways. We're beginning to look at where the best value is in terms of how we might deploy some of those technologies. Some of it's fairly obvious, like the sort of speech to text and be able to turn around content very quickly, particularly the audio collections. I think there's value in those. But from the point of view of the overall value, I think the opportunity is there to kind of, with all the other side of the business on the output, looking at the data they are gleaning from the demand, the need, the trends, to help you in the archives, maybe to target better what you're also publishing and pushing and shining a light on, so you can get greater traction with that, but you can also monetize it more.
Fascinating. Well, look, thank you all very much for taking part today. I enjoyed it. I hope everybody else found it informative as well. So Brid and Will and Christian, thank you very much for taking part as well. Thank you for watching. And well, hopefully the next time we do something like this, we'll do it in person. Thanks very much.
Yeah.